Afternoon, everyone. This is Bill Harrison, and looking forward to getting kicked off here with our webinar for January on Emma Basics for Union Representatives. If you are joining for the first time with these webinars, I'm excited to have you. And I would ask, actually, just to make sure that everything's getting set up correctly while we're waiting for the last minute attendees to sign in. If you are hearing me correctly, could you please raise your hand through the system? Excellent. So that looks like plenty of people are. I appreciate that. So you'll notice that the way that this webinar is set up is you have the ability to raise questions or chat or raise your hand if you have something that you want to say. So I can I'll type in a quick message here into our chat panel, which everybody should be seeing. I can chat out to everybody who's on the webinar, and then return, you guys can actually chat back with me as well. So it's a little bit of multitasking, and I'm not so good at that. So if I have to run the presentation and chat at the same time, please excuse me if it gives me a second to do it, but we should be good to go. Anyway, those are the basic ground rules. What we're going to do today is we're going to spend about the first 30-40 minutes of this webinar going through kind of a demo of sorts. I'm just kind of walking through Emma a little bit and kind of the functions that a union rep does. I want to make it pretty interactive. So my goal here is to have folks be able to ask questions whenever they want, and we'll basically have people, ask questions as you come up with them, and then we'll go ahead and just have sort of a Q&A session for maybe the last third of the webinar, where we can go back in and talk in a little bit more detail. So that's kind of our goal today. You can enter your messages into the chat window if you'd like to. You can also do a little hand raise, and if you have anything that you want to talk about, I can actually kind of open up the audio and let you speak as well. So that's kind of the basics of it. We should be good to go, and I think we've got just about everybody we're expecting. So why don't we go ahead and just kind of dive in and get started. As I mentioned, our topic today is Emma Basics for Union Representatives. Seemed like a good place to start with the start of a new year. Our goal here is to go ahead and go through the basics. We're going to record this webinar too, so that it'll be available as a resource if any of your team aren't able to attend today, or want to watch this on a recorded basis. We'll post it later today or tomorrow online as well. So what are we really going to go through in this agenda? I want to kind of touch on 6 topics today. The first is really the basics. How do you get started with Emma? How do you get online? So we get this question somewhat regularly. How do I create a new account and get myself onto Emma? How do I basically navigate the application? What's the structure and basic navigation? We'll touch on that a little bit. We're going to go through the basics of managing people information, member and non-member information. How do I find people? How do I update their information, and so forth? We're going to talk about how to log contacts and take notes in Emma, where we can keep that information, and how to go back and find it later. We'll walk through the process of signing up new members for those locals that use Emma for signups, which is just about everybody, and then also kind of touch a little bit on grievances and how grievances are filed in Emma. So those are the basic topics we're going to talk on. We'll kind of take a couple little sidebars on a couple of things as we go, but we'll need to move somewhat quickly because there's a fair bit for us to cover on this. So without further ado, why don't we jump over into our demo system quickly, and let's take a look at sort of the first topic that we want to cover, okay? So first thing is, how do I create a new Emma account? So the scenario here is, I'm a brand new Emma user. I'm a new field representative, organizer, business agent that's been hired, and I need to get onto Emma for the first time. Well, unlike some software, you actually in Emma register and create your own login account as a user on the system. And that's somewhat different from some software where an administrator might set up an account for you. In this case, actually, you're going to self-register, but your registration has to be approved by an administrative user. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing we would do is just go to the login screen. So in our case, we're on our Emma demo system here. Your administrator or someone else you work with can give you the URL and the login for your specific system. And then once we do that, rather than signing in, you'll notice that we have two other links here, one for a password reset. If you're a user who has forgotten or misplaced a password, that's a good place to go. But what we're going to do here is create an account. The process is quite simple. I simply create a username, register my first and last name, email address, and password, and then I'm good to go. Now, one thing to note, and I'll go through this process here and create an account for myself. I'm going to call this bill.test as my new account, and I'll register myself here pretty easily. I'm going to just create kind of a make-believe email address for myself. Now, one thing that's important to note about registering for new accounts is that Emma knows the domain that the internet domain that's associated with your system. And that means that you can't just go in here and register with any old email address. You have to use an email address that's associated with your particular domain associated with your union local. If you don't, it will reject your registration. And we do that for security purposes. We don't want, this is a public application, so we don't want just anybody trying to create an account on your system. So one way we restrict that is by limiting the creation to only email addresses under your domain. Now, there are scenarios where you might want users that are outside of your domain. So for example, lots of reps move around the country. We have situations where people do cleanups or loan out representatives to other locals to go in and help with things. And in those cases, they may need an account on another Emma system. If that's the case, if you've got part-time reps or reps with email addresses that are not specific to your local, just drop us a support request and tell us who those people are. We can go in and configure the back end of Emma to allow those registrations to take place. But if you're trying to register somebody that is not part of your domain and you're having trouble, that's probably the reason why. In my case, I have to use an Epicom or a member track domain, or I'll get an error with this one as well. And now we'll just create a password and we'll create our account. Okay, so now you'll notice once I've registered for this account that I'm getting a message that says my account must be verified. So you can't just create an account all on your own and start logging in. An administrator in the system has to validate you as a user, has to say this person is okay. So with that, what will happen, I'm logged in here as an administrator in another browser. I'm going to go over here into the administrative settings. Now, this is not something that a typical field user would use, but it is something that an administrative user would see. And you'll notice that when I'm here, there are a couple of users. Here's one called Bill Harrison with the email address bill+test. You'll notice that I have to actually send a verification email to this user. So in other words, when you register for an account, your administrator then needs to go in and say, yep, that account is authorized to use this system. And when they send this verification email, that's what actually activates your account. So now I've sent a verification email back to the user, and now that user can log in and use the system as they want. Hopefully this kind of makes sense. So just to show you what that looks like, let's jump back over here to my email, and you'll notice that I now have an email message from Emma that says, hey, Bill, you just created an account and you're all verified from your administrator. Now all you need to do is verify that this is actually your email address. This, of course, is a security precaution, and also just to make sure you don't do something like, let's say you made a typo in your email address or something. We want to make sure that you're actually connected to that address. So all I have to do here is click this button to verify my email, and I'm good to go. Now I'm ready to go. I'm all authorized and verified on the system, and I can log back in using my bill.test credentials. and I can sign in. Okay. Now, I'm a brand new user, and you'll notice a couple of things with me being a brand new user. I can't see anything. There are no people in here. There are no work locations or stores for me to see. There are no grievances for me to see. And again, we'll touch on the specifics of doing Emma admin under a different in a different webinar. But the other key thing to remember when you're setting up a new user, or when a new user is being authorized, is that they then have to be granted access to the specific portions of Emma that they want to see. So again, I'll go back into my administrative account here. Now in my admin account, I can see everything, right? So I've got all the people and everything that I want to see. But if I'm an administrator and I have a brand new user like the one that we just looked at, before that user can actually start using the system, I would need to go into the user settings, pull up that user profile here, edit it with the little pencil icon, and then add work locations that this person would be able to see. Okay. And once that's done, you'll notice that my other user will now start to be able to see data in the system. We'll can go back over there and see that, but it's pretty straightforward. So just remember that if a new user gets registered and logged in correctly and still isn't seeing any information, 99% of the time, the reason is because they haven't had any work locations or stores associated with their account, and that's what's prohibiting them from seeing anything. Emma restricts visibility based on that, so you can only see the people and the information associated with the work locations that representative actually works. We do that for security reasons. Not every rep needs access to all the information, but also we do it just to keep things manageable. Otherwise, there's so many people records and so much information to see that it can become more daunting for the rep to actually flow through everything that needs to be done. Okay, so that's the basics of, let me go back to my admin account, since that's going to be where we're going to work from for the rest of what we're doing. So that's the basics on how to get set up. If I'm a new user, I need to get registered. I register on that login page, and my admin then just has to authorize my account, and I'm good to go. Okay, so now I'm in Emma. I have access to the system. So what am I going to see, and what is the basic orientation? So let's make a minute looking at that, and then we'll start to look at how to manage some people information inside the application. The first thing you'll notice when you come into Emma is that up at the top, we have a top level navigation that includes stores. This might be labeled something differently in your system, like work locations. Many of the things you'll see today, you may see slight terminology differences because different locals call things differently. So individual systems may be configured slightly differently, but generally speaking, the concepts are all the same. We have a people module that maintains information on all of the people in our database. And then typically we maintain a database of grievances, and then also a documents library that is associated with everything that gets generated by a field rep or by a back office person. So at this high level, we can navigate to stores, people, grievances, documents just through the navigation structure. If you're an administrative user, you'll also see this admin user, but if you're not an administrative user, you won't. So a normal, kind of representative in the field would not be seeing this menu at all. A couple of other things to note. One, there's a little number here with a little bell icon next to it, and also a little thing that looks like an inbox with a number next to it. So what are these? So these are notifications and messages that are being sent to this user. As we'll see in a minute, Emma has a lot of automation associated with reminding people to do things and with messaging. So in the case of this notification capability, if I click on this number, you're going to see a number of notifications here. Now, these are notifications that are associated with grievances. So if I have a grievance that I'm managing in the system, and that grievance is assigned to me, I can establish, and we'll talk a little bit about this, a set of rules that would do things like remind me to take certain steps at certain times, remind me to establish meetings or to follow up on a particular grievance of a particular level. Now, all of that automation can be configured by your administrator inside of Emma, but as a user, if you have one of those notifications, it's something to pay attention to. It means that this grievance has some sort of an issue associated with it, and we can click through to the grievance and we'll find out what that specific task is. Secondly, you'll see the inbox icon here. In this case, if I click on this inbox, you're going to see messages that are coming into me as a user inside of the system. When we start looking at how to take notes and log information in Emma, you'll see that we can use Emma as a communication mechanism. And when we do, when we message people in Emma, this inbox is where those messages are going to show up. Okay, so the basics of navigation there. When I come into a module, let's say the people module, I then can search for people here just based on name typically. I also, depending on, again, on how your system is configured, can typically search for people by things like their social security number or the last four of their social, or in some cases by a member ID. There are individual configuration changes based on the specifics of how your local works. Some locals deal with member numbers a lot, so their search is configured for that. But usually what we want to do is just search for a name. So if I want everybody named Smith, I can simply type the name Smith, and this system's going to filter down to me out of the 1,400 and 1,149 people, the ones that are only have the term Smith in them, right? And I can search for these and just break that down to only those people that are named Smith. This search is going to be searching for this information in a number of fields. It could be first name, it could be last name. So if I look for somebody like Bob or Rob, for example, and I search for that, I might get somebody called Robertson here, right? Or Roberson, because they actually contain the string Rob. So it will actually just look for any instance where that particular string of characters ROB is contained, right? So sometimes you might look for, Sue and you get Suzanne because you'll see that that's a portion of that string. So basics for how to search for people. We also have the ability to filter people searches by things. For example, we might want to look at people only associated with a particular work location. So we can do that filter. Or maybe we want to just filter down to people who are only members. So we can select just members, or maybe just members and just members who have never paid dues before. So these person types can be selected. And as you can see, the system is filtering down our database into the correct set. So in this case, out of all of the people in our database, the ones associated with this work location that are either members or members that have never paid dues is equal to 211 people. Okay. As we scroll through the list, we'll see those people. And you'll notice that Emma, rather than paginating these where you have to click a next button to move from thing to thing, it will instead just allow you to continuously scroll. So you'll notice that now we're showing 75 of these users, but as we go through the list and continue to scroll down, Emma will just load the next set of 25 as we go automatically, okay, so that we can see all 211 that are there. Okay, so that should give you the basics of kind of how to find people. When we're finished, we can clear filters and go back to our initial list. As I mentioned, there were 1,149 people here in our demo database. So that clears back and gives us all of those people. Now, if you're doing this on an iPad, I'm obviously demoing all of this on a desktop computer today. And in fact, one thing I might do is just make this a little bigger for you. Maybe that makes things easier. I realize I'm on a very high resolution screen and might make it a little hard for people to see this. So hopefully I get some thumbs up on that change and make it a little easier for you guys to see things. On an iPad, the process is exactly the same. These same search mechanisms are available. The interface is virtually identical. Okay. Secondly, how would we filter information once we have searched and filtered information? How can we sort it? So you'll notice that all of these column headings have a little arrow associated with them. So last name, first name, store, key person. We're able to look at information and then just sort these lists accordingly if we want to. By default, a list of people is going to come up by last name in alphabetical order, but I can click on this column heading and I can reverse that sort, and I now will get all of the people by reverse alphabetical order with all the Z's coming first. Likewise, I can also search by first name as well and do the same thing, or any of these, right? Any of these characteristics of the way. For example, let's say I want to come in here and see all of my members, but I'd like to see them in order of hire date. I can just click on that, and there's my hire date. You'll notice I'm missing a few hire dates on a couple of people, and then here are all of my hire dates from the oldest to the newest. If I click this again, it's going to take me from the newest to the oldest, all the way back to to look at my current members who are in the database. Okay, now, so that's some basics about navigation. You'll notice now that this same interface is exactly what you will see when you do things like look at grievances or look at documents or go into your store or work location listing. You have the same basic setup with a search bar, some ways to then filter these lists, although the criteria can be different. Your basic priorities are the same. Okay, so all of that information is kind of there. Now, so that's a kind of quick overview of how to navigate and how the structure of the application is in place. Now let's take a look at now that I kind of know my way around a little bit, so what am I actually going to want to do as a rep, right? What are the actual functions that I'm going to be performing? Well, one of the primary ones is to make sure that we have accurate information about all of our members when we interact with them in the field, and make sure that we're tracking all the times that we interact with members so that we know that we're servicing them at an appropriate level. Okay, so let's look at those two kind of basic functions. One way that would happen, or maybe the most typical way, would be going on site and pulling up the work location for a particular physical location. So in this case, I label these stores that, as I mentioned, they may be labeled as other things in your system, but the concept is the same. So let's pull up a work location, and in this work location, we will see a bunch of basic information, right? Contact information, where that store is located. Typically, some key people are specified here in contact info, like the manager of the site. Oftentimes, membership percentages or political contribution percentages are here. Again, these are customized by a user or by a customer, by union, but that information should all be there. Okay, so when we pull up this information and we pull up a work location, very typically this is where we're going to start in terms of looking for a person at a site. We certainly can just go to the people module and search for their name or search for their social and pick them up, but oftentimes we're on site and we might want to just look at a list of all of our members or all of the information that we're looking for. Okay, so we would do that again, just to show you what I was doing, by going here and clicking on this members tab. So our scenario would be, we're on a work site, we want to look for all of our members, and we want to find a particular person, right? So here are all of our members that are associated with this particular work location, and we wanted to, let's say, talk to somebody named Bob. Well, that's not good because I didn't get a good Bob. We got a lot of Richard Gustafsons in there. I'm not sure who that guy is, but we'll have to try to find him. So let's just go with Adrian Lewis. So when I want to find Adrian Lewis, again, I can just search here and pull Adrian's information up from this listing. So one of the first things we want every rep to do when they're in the field is, if I'm interacting with a member or even a prospective member, I want to make sure that their information is correct, right? So we're gonna find them in the database, pull this information up, and while we're talking to them, say, hey, is this still your cell phone number? Is this still your accurate telephone number? Is this your physical address? In particular, it's important to do things like make sure cell phones are correct, make sure emails are correct. One of the main focal points of our locals these days is making sure that they have accurate contact information for electronic messaging and marketing. So we want to make sure that those things are updated. We even have some automated tools in many of our systems for locals that will flag a record for a member if they do not have a cell phone, for example. That'll give the rep a list of people to go talk to go collect cell phone numbers. So if that's something you want to do in your local that you're not currently doing, ping me offline. We can show you how you can flag these numbers when they're blank and provide a list to your reps in the field to show them how to go out and find just the people that are missing a cell phone number or just the people that are missing an email address. Okay, so pretty straightforward. We talk to the member, we find out what their information is, and if we want to change it, we simply click the edit button and we can go in here and change anything that we want. If it turns out that the cell phone number is incorrect, then we can just go in and correct their cell phone number, put the correct information in, maybe update an email address or any other thing that's incorrect, and simply save the information by clicking on the save button here. One thing you'll notice as well is that different unions have different rights associated with who can edit what information. So in my demo system as an admin user, for example, I can edit the social security number, but not all systems will have that. For the most part, field representatives are not going to have the ability to edit things like a social security number, and that's all configured on a local by local basis, so you may see some variation there. But let's say we want to change this person's information. We're going to be able to do that quite simply, right? My message here would be the number one thing I think when we have reps in the field that we really want them to do is, number one, first and foremost, make sure the information we have about the member is correct. Okay, and so always when interacting with a member, make sure that person is pulled up on the iPad, make sure you know a little bit about them, show them the iPad, ask them, is this the correct information that we have for you? Can I update any of this contact information? As I mentioned, we have ways of tracking things like missing cell phones or even bad email addresses or bad physical addresses if you've gotten returned mail from customers. And we can help you automate the process of just creating lists of people that you need to go follow up with. So again, ping me if that's not something your local is doing that you're interested in doing. I can show you how some other locals are doing that work. In a nutshell. Okay, so now we've got this person's information updated. So we're having an interaction with Adrian. What are the other things that we want to do? Well, the second thing that's really essential that we want all reps to do is to log the interaction with the customer. We call that a contact. So we want to always log any interaction we have with a member in the field. Frankly, with a non-member in the field, we want to. Anytime that a rep is out there talking to somebody, we want to keep track of what that interaction was about. Now, this can be done really simply by pulling up the person, clicking on this contacts button, and clicking on the log contact capability. Okay. When I do that, you'll notice that I get a little pop-up window. It will by default assign my my contact to me. It's assuming that I'm the one making this, although as an admin, I could assign this contact to somebody else if I'm entering the contact for another person. It'll also default to today's date, but if I'm entering a contact for a member that I had yesterday, maybe I forgot to log it, I can always change this date to specify the date that the actual contact took place on. Now, what Emma does is makes it very, very quick and easy for you to just with two, well, I guess I should say 3 clicks, specify what my interaction was about. Okay, so I'm talking to this member and the member has a question for me about a, health and welfare issue. Okay, so I update that member's information, I click on contact, I click on health and welfare, and then I simply hit save. Now, what that does is now you'll see it adds a record into my contact database that is showing that on this date at this time, on the 23rd, 12:26 p.m., that Bill Harrison logged a contact with this member, Adrian Lewis, relating to health and welfare. Now, what's nice about this is I can now go back and report on this. So if an administrator wants to know, hey, how many times in the last 6 months have we had conversations with our members about health and welfare, that's an easy thing to develop a little filter and custom report on. A little outside the scope of today's webinar, but it's something that many locals are doing already, and maybe that would be a future topic for us if it's of interest. We could just do some simple reporting scenarios like that. So some really nice stuff, like how often are reps talking to people? What are the questions that are most frequently being asked? Just basic stuff that we want to know about what our membership is doing. Okay. Now, there's another capability. You'll notice maybe when I logged that contact that I kind of went through that quickly, just hitting the contact and hitting health and welfare, but you'll notice there's also a note field here as well. And so with this logging, I can also put a note in, right? So maybe this was a health and welfare question, but I want to put some, specific information, regarding the question just gets inserted here, okay? Now, if I do that and I save this, now you'll notice I also am gonna have a note that's associated with this. So I see my health and welfare log, but I can also go here to my notes tab, and now you'll see that I also have the note that I just entered here underneath my note tab as well. So the contact will actually keep track of each of the little individual timestamps of a contact. If we have notes, those notes can be entered while we put a contact in, or I can just create a note somewhere else as well in this whole process, right? So we want to make sure we're at the very least logging those contacts every time. And that should just be standard protocol for every rep in the field. Talk to a member, log a contact, and just make it that simple. Now, what would we also want to do with notes? Well, one thing is to specify what I just did, which is to actually put some additional information behind the contact to say something like, what was the question about health and welfare, or what needs to be done. But let's say the scenario is I'm talking to a member in the field and I actually need to get a question answered from somebody else inside of our inside of our union local to find out what they're doing. This is where Emma works as a communication method. And if people aren't using Emma for this process, I would really encourage you to start doing this. What do I mean? Let's say the scenario with Adrian resulted in a question regarding health and welfare, but I don't have the answer to it and I need to ask somebody else. I can just do an @mention here by typing the @ very much like a social media platform. I type the @ and I begin to type the name of the person that I want to send the message to. In this case, I'm going to send it to Ethan and say, hey, Ethan, Adrian has a question I could not answer. Can you please follow up? Right? So very simple process. I'm in the field. I don't know how to answer the question. I find somebody within the local who can answer the question. Maybe this is somebody in the back office. Maybe it's my manager. Maybe it's another rep. I can save that note, and you'll notice now it shows up as part of the communication history for this rep, but it also tags Ethan and then will message Ethan. Now, remember when we were doing the overall navigation and we were looking at how to actually look at those little indicators that were at the top of the screen? Well, this is where the inbox comes in handy, because here, when I go into the inbox, if I'm logged in as Ethan, I'm going to see that message that I just sent, right? So in Ethan's inbox right now, there's a little 1 up here, and that little 1, if he clicks on it, is going to be a message from me that says, hey, this person, Adrian Lewis, has a question, okay? And that will then be, allow us to begin the dialogue on how to fix that, right? So now Ethan can answer the question here in the notes. Ethan could tag me back and say, hey, Bill, here's the answer to your question. Please relay this to the member. There's a lot that can be done here to make sure that we're maintaining a complete communication history. Now, the reason we really encourage locals to do this is that this is going to be, in the long run, a much better scenario than using email to do this, or using text messaging to do this back and forth, because it's going to keep the entire history in this member's record, right? If I get a question from a member and I just text somebody in the office and say, hey, can you answer this question? And then I give the answer to the member, I now don't have any record that that actually took place, right? The beauty of Emma is we want this whole rich history with these members and everything that happens. Even if Adrian Lewis quits tomorrow and leaves and moves away, if Adrian ever comes to work for a employer who is employed, who works with your union, who is organized by your union, this database record will come back and this entire rich history will be here, right? So what we really want is this total relationship with this member. That's what's going to allow us to know them better, understand who our political advocates are, understand who the people are that we can start using to help maybe recruit stewards or find other ways to try to benefit the local. So there's a bunch of stuff that benefit from that if we're doing this. So when I'm in training and we're working with new reps, these are the things I like to see reps do first and foremost. Make sure contact information is up to date. Make sure contacts are being logged. Make sure they know how to send messages and do @mentions inside of the application so that communication can stay as part of that member history. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Hopefully that's kind of helpful. Okay, we're covering a lot today. There's a lot of stuff with a brand new rep, but we'll move through a couple of other questions. I'm just glancing to make sure we don't have any major questions that are there. But it sounds like, okay, good. Yeah, I've got a couple, but nothing that's too critical. So I've done this. Now, what are the other things that I'm going to do as a rep that are the most typical kind of basics? Well, the next one most typically is going to be I'm going to sign people up in one manner or another. Even in a lot of our closed shop locals, reps in the field are signing members up and getting an electronic signature done on an application, even if that's not something that's required. And certainly in the right to work locals, it is. So how do I do that process? Well, it's very similar. I may go to my store and come up with a list of people that I want to talk to. In a right to work environment, very typically, I'm going to open up a store or a work location. I'm going to come down here and look at non-members, and then I'm going to find my non-members here as a way to work with them and sign them up. Couple things to note if you're not familiar with this. Notice that these are color-coded. Right. So one of the things that Emma does is it color codes people's names by their seniority with the local. So you'll notice I've got a bunch of people who are yellow here, and then I have a bunch of people that are red. Okay. And their red is based on how long they've been around. So these people, this person had a hire date of September 2018, is still in yellow, but this person, Ethan Kennedy, who has a hire date of 2015, is in red. Now, the reason we do this is because we want you to be able to highlight your newest members and find the people, or your newest prospective members if you're in a right to work environment. The data shows, particularly in right to work, that the sooner you can get to non-members when they get hired, the higher your odds of getting them signed up. I mean, it goes up. It's staggering, the data. Like if you wait a couple of months, your odds of signing them go way, way down. But if you can find them in the first week or so, your odds of getting them signed go way up. And so what we do is we color code these for you. Now, the thresholds for the color codes, that's something you can determine. Some locals make the person green for the first 6 months, and then yellow for another 6 months after that, and then red after they've been around for a year. It really varies from local to local. Again, it's a configurable thing in the system. What's important is that as a rep, when you go out here and you look at these colors and you say, why are these colored? That's why. So typically you're going to want to go for your green people and find them first, right? They're your most important, are the ones that are brand new. And you can find them a couple of different ways. We can come to non-members, and then we can also typically filter further any kind of non-member list and find the people that we're looking for. One thing that will happen within Emma is that people are never deleted from the database. So if a member comes in and is terminated, quits their job, they're not a member anymore, they're going to fall into this non-member list because they're not a paying member anymore. So over time, you should expect to see more and more people in this non-member list as you're adding people to Emma, but then they're going away. So one way to manage that complexity is to filter by person type. So if you're just looking for terminated people, there are all your terminated people. Usually we have some sort of a non-member like new hire category in here, and very often that would be what we would filter on to find our new members. But regardless of how we go get them, we pull somebody up, we have this person's member record, and the next thing we want to do is make sure that we get them through an electronic application process. So we join them up. Again, this is done in Right to Work locals, it's done in closed shop locals as well. Emma makes this easy for you by copying all of the pertinent information already over to the application. So if the data is in the database, name, address, social security number, it's automatically filled out on the application form. We might want to go in here and also add anything that's missing. Like this, in this particular person, there's department and job title information are missing. So maybe we go in here and update those to make sure that they're correct. Verify whether they're a registered voter or not, other information that's interesting to us. So, and then the process is quite simple, right? We get them filled up, we have their terms of membership, we give them the iPad, and we have them sign their name. Now, this language that you see here is going to be customized to your local. So I've got generic kind of language here, but each local has different language. So you should expect your screens to look slightly different. Okay, I have the option to go ahead and add a political checkoff if they want to contribute to your political fund. This is done by week, by month. Different locals do it different ways, but the function is the same to get them to specify a political checkoff, and then also to typically authorized dues checkoff so that their dues are deducted from their paycheck every month and paid directly into the local. Again, we have the big blue join button at the bottom of the screen, and when we click that, I won't join this person because I don't want to mess up our data, but we'll go through. When we join this person, they will then officially become a member, and they will then be specified as such in the database. Like they will be turned, their person type will change to member, and a membership application will get generated for them. Okay. In fact, we may go ahead and do that. I don't know if it'll cause us too much trouble. Always a little wary to do this on all of our demo. But when we do join, notice one thing, that we had a little pop-up menu here, a little pop-up message that says generating PDF. So the system, again, is going to generate for you that membership application. Okay. And it'll take a minute for it to happen, but as a rep in the field, if you want to go see that membership application, you can simply go down to documents underneath this person, and you're going to see that membership application here. Notice that it says currently generating this PDF. So the system takes a minute to generate the PDF document that represents that membership application, but this is where it will appear when it's there. Okay. So basics of sign up, right? Simple task. Most of you are probably already doing this, but if you're a new rep in the field, these are the functions that you're going to be providing and doing every day. One of the things that's top of mind for a lot of locals right now is, how can I use Emma to increase political contributions? We're in a election year. This is top of mind for a lot of locals. May even make another webinar topic just out of this, frankly. But one thing that a lot of successful locals are doing is they're using this sign-up capability specifically to go back and get increased political contributions from their members. And they can usually are doing that by just going through the application process again, having the member sign a new app, and then specify a new political contribution amount. And the reason that that's helpful, and the reason it's good to have them sign a whole new app, is that it saves you from having to look at whether they actually are using your most recent application or not. Oftentimes, application language changes. We might have an old application on file for a member that's been around for years. We convince that member to do a political contribution, and this gives us a chance to update them to a more recent version of the application at the same time. So for most of our locals, what they're actually doing is they're just out there in the field, they're signing up people, effectively going through the same process as a sign up, but just focusing on the political contribution component. Okay. Something else to think about as you're a rep in the field, if this is a focal point for your local, is to look at this person and see if they're contributing. So if I look at Vincent Landon, I can take a look here and see that, yep, Vincent is contributing $1 per paycheck to our fund, in this case labeled as ABC, but this is the political fund. And then there's typically a flag that's a yes or no, are they participating or not, as well as an amount. Again, these fields will vary a little bit from local to local, but are kind of the same. So this is information that's important to look at as you're working with people in the field. Of course, this is $1 because we just signed this guy up and we just made him $1. But when we go look at some other people, we'll notice that many of them are not. So a good best practice when you're in the field talking to members is, if you're updating their contact information, if you're verifying that everything is good, take a look at their ABC contribution amount or their political contribution amount and see if they're contributing. Ask them if this is something they're interested in. It's an election year. Are you interested in the issues that the union is interested in? You can help advocate and advance our causes by making these contributions, and that's an opportunity to do it. We've got several locals right now that are running campaigns just on that and looking very closely at how they can increase political contributions across their membership. Again, if it's of interest, I think it's something it's very top of mind for me, and I may make it next month's webinar topic if there are enough people that are interested in that. I might try to get a show of hands before we take off to go into the specifics of exactly how to run that campaign, how to report the data, how to track it, and so forth. Okay, so if this guy were not participating, obviously the ABC amount would be 0, and we would be able to see easily that there was no political contribution that's going on. So another function important for the rep to do in the field. Okay, there are others, and we're going to be bumping up against our time limit here before too much, and I want to make sure we have time for some Q&A, and I'm stepping through a lot quickly. The third, I should say third, kind of the fourth major topic that I'll kind of touch on is filing a grievance for a member as well. Now, not all locals are having reps do grievances, right? Some local stewards file grievances. So the process could vary a little bit, but I think the mechanism is going to be consistent in that you want all these grievances to end up in EMMA one way or the other. We'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. And we want the process to be automated as much as we possibly can. So what's good about the grievance mechanism is it's very, very similar to what we just did to do a member sign up in terms of the mechanics. If my Landon Vincent is my member who is needs to file a grievance, just as I looked at his employee information, went down and looked at contact information and notes, I can click here to grievances and see any kind of grievance history that this member has given me. And then I can also just file a grievance by clicking this big add grievance button here. The scenario is similar to a sign up. The system will automatically copy appropriate information over, like the grievance email address, automatically populate the date that the grievance was filed. Again, different grievance intake forms are different, so you may see slightly different layouts on your system, but the general mechanism is the same. We specify the details of the grievance. We will specify a settlement that's requested if we know that, and then we can specify details around the steps of the grievance. In this case, we have a 3-step process that are specified. In some cases, the grievance being filed requires a signature. So in some of your systems, you'll see a signature box where a grievance needs to sign, and that will then generate the grievance form with the grievance signature. In other cases, that's not a requirement, but the mechanism is similar in that a PDF document is going to get generated that comes out of this process. Similarly, as long as they are set up correctly, the rep in the field will also specify what articles and sections of the contract were violated in this particular grievance. It looks like I don't have those set up for this location in our demo system, but the mechanism is quite straightforward. The rep would simply click this little add article and section button, specify the sections of the contract that were violated, and then when that's done, that contract language is actually copied onto the grievance form and made available as part of the PDF, okay? So the system takes care of that. The mechanism is pretty straightforward for doing it. So this is the other thing. Now, let's look at the scenario that we just mentioned. Well, what do I do when it's a steward that files grievances and the steward doesn't have access to Emma, or some other scenario? Well, when that happens, what we want to do is we still want to try to capture that electronically. How would we do it? The best way is usually to have a rep add it, or have somebody in the back office add it electronically, so that we can keep track of what is happening inside that grievance. So the way we would do that is usually we're going to take a photograph or take an image of that paper grievance. In some cases, paper grievances come into the office and are processed that way. We typically, if we can, would avoid that. I mean, we would rather keep it all electronically. So different locals do different processes, but very typically a steward might have a grievance form filled out and do something as simple as snap a picture of that with their phone, forward it on to the appropriate rep, or forward it on to a grievance manager in the back office. That grievance manager that can then enter the information into Emma, but then upload a copy of that electronic form so that we have the actual original information that's being done. If I go look at a grievance, you may see some of this. So let me just pull up a couple of existing grievances. When we have a grievance that's already been filed, couple of things to note here. One, as I've pulled this up, is that my alerts are being given to me here. Remember at the beginning of the navigation exercise, I was mentioning that up here around this little alarm bell means that there are things going on with my grievances. There are deadlines I need to worry about. Well, it turns out when I pull up this particular grievance for Kaiser, here are the thresholds that have been met. I need to set up a meeting with store management. I need to alert reps for every pending grievance. These are just test alerts that we've set up, but these again are configured for you guys individually for whatever you want. So this is what reminds the rep, oh man, I need to make sure I schedule that, step 2 meeting or whatever needs to be done. Okay. When I'm looking at documents with this, you'll see with the grievance that usually I have a grievance letter or other things that are being generated by the grievance system. This is a complex topic that is worthy of another webinar. But again, if I want to simply add a photograph of that original grievance document, I can do that here on my iPad. This is my desktop computer, so I can upload it. But on my iPad, that would give me the choice to actually just take a picture. So a grievance that's filed in the field, the rep could usually just enter in the basic information and snap a picture of that original photo of that original form and utilize it that way. So again, I'm stepping through this pretty quickly. I just want to give you the basic stuff, the basic things that I think every rep should know how to do and that every rep should be able to do out in the field. So we're now within about 10 minutes of our time. What I want to do is make sure people have an opportunity to ask questions. I think there's probably a lot of individual stuff that people are doing in the field that are different than either different than what I'm describing or variations on what I'm describing. So my question would be, and go ahead and feel free to just like stick them into chat if you want, would be, what questions do you have on this process? What issues or constraints are you finding? What problems are you finding that we could address today on how your reps are using the system in the field and what they need to do to become more effective? Any thoughts or ideas? And you can go ahead and just shoot stuff in via text to me if you want, or even just do a little raise of hand, and you can just jump on. I can like open up the phone line, and you can basically talk, and everybody will hear you when you do. So if you want to be talking, you can do that as well. But any questions that we want to address that are on people's mind, and if not, I'll dive into a few other topics. But I want to make sure we're leaving ample time for this to occur. So I'm not getting a ton. So let me do this then while folks are thinking about whether they have other questions. One of the main things that we'll look at with new deployments when we've deployed Emma is just kind of rep acceptance. The big issue is, if we can get the reps in the field using the tool, then everything is great. And so what are the things that we can do to make that easier or to make that happen? So that's probably a worthwhile conversation a little bit as well. And there are a few kind of best practices that we've talked about. One is touching on what we mentioned a little before, which is making it the standard practice, that reps do all of their interaction with Emma and not have a partial paper process and a partial Emma process. It's imperative that they have that iPad with them every day, and that's their go-to tool for everything that they're doing. So I think that is number one. Secondly, making it the standard practice that they update information and log contacts for every interaction. And this becomes a little bit of a thing where some management oversight is needed, right? Emma will give you the tools easily to see whether or not reps are logging contacts or are interacting with members. It's not difficult to do. And for many of the locals that have had the greatest success with Emma, they have taken the position of, look, if it isn't logged in Emma, if you haven't tracked this information, then it kind of hasn't happened, right? So if you're out there in the field and you're working hard, you need to record that work so that you get credit for it, so that people know what you're doing. And one way that we can help reinforce that is by just making sure we're looking at those numbers, making sure that reps are doing that every day. So it becomes a little bit of, incenting them to do the work, but then also just monitoring it and making sure that people are doing the work. A second is we found a lot of success with people doing kind of setting up what I would kind of call super users or kind of buddy users, particularly in new deployments. Reps will get out in the field, they'll have questions about what to do, they're not sure, they watched the training, but they forgot how to file a grievance or they forgot how to add the note. So find somebody in your organization who becomes an early adopter, and have them be a go-to resource. They can do the communication in Emma. I mean, they can do the @mention function and say, hey, I'm trying to add a document to this person's record and I can't remember how to do it. Can you show me? Allow them to have a resource that's other than calling us or having to call their boss. I think the more people in the field, the more peer-to-peer support there is, the better off that has worked, we found, with most of the locals we've looked at. Okay, I have a couple questions that have come in. One is around how to delete a document. So that's a really, really good question. So this is one we get all the time. So here's my scenario, right? Just like I'm looking at here. I've got a grievance. I have all these documents associated with the grievance. And now all of a sudden I say, geez, I don't want this anymore. I want to delete one of these. And the easy answer to your question is that we have to do that for you. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is we are very, very careful about making sure that information that is needed is not accidentally deleted in Emma. So we always err on the side of being super cautious about the deletion of information permanently. As a result, what you do when you want to get rid of that is send us a support ticket and include in that support ticket a link to the thing that you want deleted, right? So if I wanted to go to, for example, take this grievance document here, and I wanted to delete this. Oops, sorry about that. I just went right back to go back to where my grievance was. Sorry, guys, I just messed my little screen up here. I'll have to bring it back up. But when you want to do that deletion, the best way to make that happen is to just send us a link to the specific thing you want deleted, submit it to us in a support request, and we'll take care of it. They're very, very routine. We process, I don't know, half a dozen of them a week probably for different locals. And one of the reasons that we do this manually for you is that we back all that data up, then we delete it, and we make sure we keep records of everything so that if you ever came back later and said, oh, wait, I really actually need that document, we have a record of it that we can restore for you. I think as you see Emma evolve as a product, we're going to turn over more of that administrative capability to users. So you will see us giving you the ability to delete documents and things, but we have to put some fail safes in place. For example, who has the permission to do it? Not everybody should be allowed to do that. And then what happens if you change your mind? Do we actually delete it and it's gone, or do you just delete it and keep it around for a while so you could restore it if you need to? So it's not quite as trivial as it sounds. That being said, we are building more and more admin tools around data management. So expect to see some of that rolling into the product this year. But in the meantime, the easy answer is shoot us a support ticket and we will take care of the deletion for you. Easy peasy. It takes us 2 minutes to do it. So it's not a difficult thing to do. What other questions are on folks' minds? Anything else that would be that we should take a look at or talk about? Sign out of this and go back into my admin account. Okay. So if that's not the case, since we're right up against or getting very close to our time, I'm going to probably just make a couple of little closing pieces and then wrap this up. Again, we're back to where we were with our grievances. So I accidentally closed out that window. My apologies for that. Our goal for this year is to be more consistent with these webinars and to allow them to build a library of knowledge for you. So we will take the recording of this webinar, it will be put into our knowledge base. I'll send out an email with a link to that. And my goal is that this could be used as a basic training mechanism for a new rep who comes in, right? When you hire somebody and they say, hey, what do I do with Emma? How do I get started with Emma? You could simply sit them down and let them watch this recording and they would get a pretty good introduction on here's the basics of getting around the application with what we want to do. I'm very open to ideas for new webinar topics. I want these to be representative of things that you guys are facing and issues that you're having or questions that you have or problems that you're having. So I really welcome the feedback of people to say, hey, here's what we want to hear. Here's what we want to learn. Here's what we want to know. I have a few ideas up my sleeve, and I mentioned one, which is running a political campaign, like a political contribution campaign, increasing political contributions through Emma. And I think that, that would be my top of list idea for what to cover next month. I probably will get this scheduled and try to do these webinars the same day of the month, like, second Tuesday of the month or something, so that they're always at the same time. It's a little hard sometimes with my travel schedule, but I'm going to try to do that as much as I possibly can so that you guys have a little bit better advance notice. Get a couple other quick questions here at the end, and then I'm going to peel off because I think people are going to start disappearing. Is there a way to add a grievance number to a grievance file outside of the number Emma issues to it? So that's a really good question. We've had some questions now around grievance numbers. So one thing to notice is that the way we typically name grievances is by the year and then a sequential date. So in 2020, the first grievance that you file is 2020-1, and then it'll be -2, -3, -4, and then next year that'll reset into 2021 and begin numbering again. That's a pretty standard numbering scheme. It's worked pretty well. There isn't really we can change those numbers, and we have changed them. We've had a couple requests since the beginning of this year for people that filed grievances in 2020, but actually were for grievances that happened in 2019, and they've asked us to go back and alter the numbers to be 2019. We can do that. So if you have a situation like that, send us a support ticket. We'll get it fixed for you and do it the way you want. If there is what the question here was more to try to make it match by location. And I think that the easy answer there would be, let's kind of take that one offline as a bit of a one-off. It probably can be done. It would just require a different mechanism for including probably the location number perhaps, or the location code inside that grievance number. I mean, it's something that could be done, but it's hard for me to answer just off the top of my head for something that's that specific. So my request would be, let's take that one offline, figure out what your requirements are, and we can do it. And that would help. One other question, here's a really good one. Can members be contacted via text or email using Emma? So that's a great question. And the answer is, in some cases, yes. What we do, the most sophisticated so here's where that members can be. Remember when we signed up that member and we went through the member sign up process, Emma can be configured to notify via email anybody you want when a new member is signed up. Now, what's most typically done is we typically notify somebody in the back office. Most locals have some sort of a membership manager or somebody like that who wants to receive an email when a new member is signed. Many locals also send that email to the member itself. So the member might receive a welcome email that comes directly from Emma, along with, in some cases, a PDF copy of the membership application for their records. If you're not already doing that, Emma can be set up quite simply to do it. You just need to tell us who you want to send these to. And we will take, it's a configuration setting in the back end. So Emma will do that. Similarly with grievances, and this is a whole huge topic. We probably should do just a webinar on grievances. The grievances system has an email module associated with it that allows grievance managers to automatically send emails to members. And you'll notice when you go to grievances under emails that you can go in here and start sending emails. And when you do that, the people that you can send recipients to include people at the employer, the member themselves, whatever you want to do. So again, a lot of complexity here. Reach out to us if you want some more sophisticated. We have some resources in our knowledge base on using this stuff. But Emma will also send emails that way. It will send emails for anything associated with a grievance to allow that communication to happen. Now, in terms of generic text messaging, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it's something that I think I would like to see us take Emma in that direction. We don't currently. For example, you can message another user in Emma using that notes capability like I showed you, but you can't send a text message to the member using the same thing. I personally think that would be a great feature to have. I love the idea that in addition to having like the notes here that are back and forth with users, if I could also send a note to the member and say, hey, I answered your question around health and welfare, here's the answer, have it sent as a text and have it stored in this note history, I think that would be a great feature. It's not. I'll just put it this way. It's probably in our top half a dozen development priorities for the product. I'd love to hear feedback from people on whether they think that's an important feature or not. Because right now we have probably 10 or a dozen high priority things, and we're sitting here at the beginning of the year trying to figure out what our development priorities are. And that one is one that in my mind would be a very high one, because I think it would add a lot of value to the application. Right now, general purpose texting is not something that we support, but I think it probably will be something we will, and that largely depends, again, on how important it is to you. Okay, those are great questions. So we're a few minutes over, and it looks like most people have hung in there, which makes me happy. You guys are obviously work for somebody who lets you take more than an hour for lunch, which makes me happy. If there are any other last minute questions, so I got a thumbs up for the mass text email. It's interesting. The texting and emailing, there's sort of two different versions of that, or kind of two different things. One would be just kind of individual texting, like and emailing, like just an ad hoc thing, like, oh, I want to send a message to this member. The second is to do really more mass emailing and mass texting, where I could build a list and say, okay, give me every member that signed up in the last 6 months that's in these 5 zip codes, give me that list, and then send them all this text message next Tuesday. So I want to be able to do both of those things. I know many locals already use some tools for doing mass texting. So in some regards, they have that problem solved for now. But I think the value of having that happen in Emma would be huge, because then you'd have that whole record of everybody you've ever sent messages to, and you can start to figure out more data based on that, who's responding to those messages. And you have, by having all that in a consolidated database, I think it's good. So when we look at that feature, we're really looking at it at kind of two different levels. One is the ad hoc, just send a message to somebody and get a response. And the second is more the mass, messaging, email, and text messaging, which is a little more complicated, but not impossibly more complicated. So thank you for that feedback. I have several of our locals that have given me that feedback as well. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up since we're over. If you hit me with any more questions, I'll do my best. But I just want to say thank you for taking the time. We had really good attendance today. I know we covered a lot, and I hope this was a reasonable overview that would be useful to a rep who's not very familiar with Emma. Again, I really want to see that feedback. I wanted to start with something simple this year, with the idea that we would get into some more detailed and more complex topics as we work through these webinars. I'm happy to do the webinars just about as frequently as you guys want to be able to sit through them. So do send me your feedback. Let me know what questions you're having in the field. Give me the thumbs up or thumbs down on this one as well. Any suggestions? I'm not too sensitive, so I'd appreciate any feedback that's helpful on stuff that we can do to make them better. I really do appreciate the time, and with that, I think I will sign off and say thank you for taking the time, and we'll just I'll look for an email with next month's date here in the next few days. Thanks so much.